Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast. It is a few hours removed after Purdue's 7-point win at Penn State. Brian Neubert live at the Penn Stater after wrapping up the game. Tom Dienhart and myself join him, and we'll start, Brian, with you. First, we'll start with our sponsor, of course, the Union Club Hotel. We want to thank them for sponsoring them. They also sponsor Brian's rap video as well. We appreciate also the 811 restaurant and all that they do for us. And Brian, we'll start a little bit of basketball talk and then obviously get into some football. But Purdue did survive and advance. I know you've talked about this at length on your multiple platforms. Just looking at it from my perspective, really an important win. I thought Purdue took Penn State's best shot. Yeah, Purdue was an 8-point favorite. They led by 12 in the second half. Penn State all of a sudden got extremely hot. But to me, it's a quality win any way you look at it. Now I'm starting to look at the rest of the Big Ten schedule and say, anytime you win, which is kind of the way it's always been in the Big Ten, anytime you win in the Big Ten on the road, it's a good thing. And I guess I would put that in that category. What was your take here a few hours removed?
Yeah, I don't think there's such thing as a bad Big Ten road win, to be honest with you. And I think that, Purdue didn't exactly come into this game as the most known commodity here. They had to really make a step forward in terms of their defensive acumen. They had to do a better job taking care of the basketball. They had to do a better job keeping the opponent off the offensive glass. And I think check. How many checks was that? Was that only 3 checks?
You got to one over
3 checks. Anyway, I lost count. I think Purdue checked all those boxes today. I thought they made a much bigger step defensively than I think that the final stats will show, because I think that 8 of 8 run, that run where Penn State made eight straight shots and took a 13-point deficit and turned it basically into a 1-point lead, I think that was way more about Penn State than that was about Purdue, because they made some just absurd shots during that stretch. Granted, I don't think Penn State's as disciplined as Wisconsin is, obviously. So I think comparing the defensive performance against one to the other, there's a little bit of apples and oranges there. But I think Purdue, did what it needed to do. I thought they played pretty well. They got off to a good start to both halves. They were better defensively. And then obviously you play really well, but you still end up down a point in the final 4 minutes of the game. And then after that, even before that, you were making every shot you needed to make to put the game away. So you were making the offensive plays you needed to make. Penn State was just responding to every one of them. But then at the end, again, you kept making all the really, really consequential offensive plays, but you also started getting the stops too. The shot clock violation they forced late in the game was huge. The steal by Jaden Ivey when Seth Lundy tried to go baseline on him, that was huge. That's the sort of stuff that, you kind of wondered where Purdue was coming out of that Wisconsin game in terms of their ability to pull that off, especially on the road. But, they certainly passed that test.
Yeah, Brian, I know I was following you on Twitter, and you had a lot of good things to say about Mason Gillis, 14 points, 4 or 5 from the field, hit all his free throw. You really liked his free throw form. I mean, just talk about what this guy's meant to this team and going forward, how valuable he could be for the Boilermakers.
Yeah, I don't think Purdue wins this game without Mason Gillis playing the sort of game he played. I've always sort of called him a glue guy. I think that's, at this point, that's becoming kind of reductive. I don't know what the next tier from glue guy is. I don't know if that's like liquid cement guy or something, but I mean, anybody who watched the game, it isn't hard to see a guy make 3 or 4 3-pointers, including a huge one, at the end. It's not hard to look at the box score and see a guy needed only 5 shots to get 14 points. It's not the first time this season he's done that kind of thing too. It's not the first time this season he's made a huge play just by getting fouled going after an offensive rebound. That's a very unique skill, to be able to just have your effort impact the game in a tangible manner where everybody in the arena, everybody watching on TV says, hey, that game just changed because that guy is trying really hard. That's a really unique skill, and he's got it. And he's graduating out of this role sort of category. And I don't mean that as any sort of, I don't want to say slight. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a compliment calling a guy a role player. But I think he's almost graduating out of that into becoming one of Purdue's, best players.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I was talking during the course of the game with somebody I tend to text with during the game. Maybe not the MVP. I don't know what you call him. MIP, most important player, MGP, most glue player. I don't know what it is. He is just, and the one he missed was all the way down and went out. I mean, he was just, and he just has a knack for, and he hasn't missed a free throw this year. And they tried to jinx him on TV. They didn't mean to, but he made them. I don't know what else to say. He has been extremely important, and I couldn't agree more. If he doesn't make the plays he makes at the time he makes them, I'm not sure Purdue wins this game just by the way the momentum that Penn State had brought to the table. One other thing go ahead.
You know why Grady Eifert was so valuable for that team a couple of years ago was because you put a rock solid, low volume, high efficiency player around, high volume sorts of scorers. And that was a perfect complement. Guys who don't turn the ball over, guys who produce without having to run stuff for them, guys who get you extra possessions by either getting on the offensive glass or not turning the ball over, guys who are just their kind of basketball carbon footprint, for lack of a better term, is always positive. And that's where Mason Gillis is going. He makes every one of his free throws. He's got one of the best free throw forms I think I've seen at Purdue. And he barely even hits the damn rim with them. I mean, he is absolutely money from the foul line. He gets to the foul line without having to, attempt field goals. And it's just those sorts of players are so valuable when you have other guys you have to build the offense around. And I think, too, his style of play, I've said this since before Big Ten play started. I've said this since last year. I think in Big Ten play, his value comes out even more because little things matter so much more in Big Ten play. The game is so much more physical. And I think he's a better Big Ten player than he is, a general college basketball player. Whereas I think Purdue might have been a better general college basketball team up until today than they are a Big Ten basketball team. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but I'm tired.
and you just got done eating pizza, so you're good.
Yeah.
Tom, I have another question on basketball, but anything else that floats your boat in terms of Purdue hoops?
No, just again, I'm always kind of looking at what's around the corner and Tuesday night, Ann Arbor, Michigan. As a Michigan program that certainly has not lived up to expectations so far, but obviously Purdue will arrive in Ann Arbor with some momentum, Brian. I mean, we all know they're all important ball games, but kind of give us.
Tom?
Lost you. I think we lost him. Well, and again, and obviously, too, you're going to be talking about COVID.
I was going to stop him at the arrive in Ann Arbor part.
Yeah, who knows whether Purdue's going to be arriving. Talk about that, too, a little bit. We lost Tom for a second, but go ahead.
He's frozen on my screen.
Yeah, he is frozen on mine, but that's all right.
Yeah, I don't know if that game's going to be played. I think that obviously Michigan's got issues right now, and we'll see where they are, I guess, Monday, Tuesday, whatever, maybe even the morning of the game. I might find out I am going to Michigan, so I'll have to hop in the car and go. But I have a hard time seeing, them having to shut down a game on Saturday and then them being in a position. Now, I don't know the details of their case here, so I think that it's hard for me to speculate as to, how many of their guys are in the protocols and where they are and when they might come out and all that stuff. But you hope for both teams' sake everything's okay in terms of playing that game. And if that game is played, obviously that's another huge game for Purdue. Michigan's not been anywhere near what they were supposed to be this year, for a variety of reasons. They're not the most skilled team in the Big Ten. They're not the most experienced team in the Big Ten. Hunter Dickinson doesn't have a whole lot of help. You probably have a bunch of guys who are probably thinking about where they're going to be a year from now in terms of what NBA jersey they're going to be wearing, things like that. All of the perils of, being a program that brings in that sort of talent every year. So it would really behoove Purdue to come out really sharp, to play really hard, to be really disciplined, to do all the things you have to do to win on the road in the Big Ten and really take it to them from the get-go. If they're a little bit, discombobulated right now because of the circumstances of the past week or two, that might be an advantage for Purdue. But at the same time, Rutgers had like a stomach flu go through their whole team or something like that.
Yeah.
They beat Purdue, and didn't Wisconsin had just come out of a COVID shutdown.
Right.
They beat Purdue. So taking that stuff, on paper as a surefire advantage is obviously proving to be a very flawed approach.
It has been, and teams have had, Penn State, was off for 2 weeks too, and they played pretty well for the most part since they were out. So that I agree. I think you think conventional wisdom would say, well, Michigan not be able to practice before Tuesday night, and if the game gets played, it's to Purdue's advantage. But that logic tends to go in the other direction. We're still having some technical difficulties with Tom, so I don't know whether he's coming back or not. But Brandon Newman did not play today. I thought that was news. At first, I was trying to watch on TV and didn't see him on the bench, but he was correct. And and I know that I think Carm asked that at the end of the press conference. So what I saw that about that situation. What do you make of it? And again, Matt Painter was pretty decisive about saying, well, this is where you just decide to go this direction today. And of course, Caleb First had to play a little more 5 than he's played because of foul trouble for Saturday and Travion Williams. But just talk about that rotation, and did it tell you anything, or does it? No,
I mean it's a tight Big Ten road game, and players and coaches default to the players they trust the most, or the players they need on the floor the most. And you saw Jaden Ivey, I think, played 39 minutes, and Stefanovic played 37. Those are the two guys that Purdue's going to ride in the backcourt, and they certainly did today. I think coaches, the optimal word is always trust. Is who does the coach trust the most to do what they're supposed to do at both ends of the floor? That's been an issue where Brandon Newman's been a little bit uneven all season long. And when you get into a tight Big Ten game, you don't necessarily really want to roll the dice in tight situations. And sure. He will have chances again. He will play. He'll probably I'd imagine he'll do his normal rotation in the first half whenever Purdue plays again. I can't say that for certain, but I certainly don't think you've heard the last of Brandon Newman here, in the short term.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to not that everybody's jumping to conclusions. And it was funny because you just throughout the course of the game, I'm not sure that not saying I didn't miss him, but you didn't know that it just didn't. It flowed maybe a little easier in that front, and with 9 guys. And you've talked about that till you're blue in the face. Welcome back, Tom. That part of it is again a storyline of his season, and that's the other thing about the way that Travion Williams did not get to start today, but came in, responded. Whether that had a whole lot to do with it, I don't know. But he played very, very well. Another plus 20 plus game, and nearly did he get 10 rebounds? I'm not even sure,
9.
But 9. I thought he was excellent when he had to be. Played within himself offensively. I don't know if you evaluated whether he was better defensively than he's been, but I thought he was pretty good.
I think Purdue across the board was better defensively. And I think, the two guys who had to be part of the solution there are Travion Williams and Jaden Ivey. And I thought both of them did a better job, obviously not perfect, but watching with the naked eye real time, which is obviously you miss certain things. I'll go back and watch the game as soon as we're off here. Yeah. I think he did a better job. I think, Purdue generally did a better job keeping Penn State off the offensive glass. The first half, there were a couple instances, but Travion Williams is always a good offensive player. That is never the issue. He's always that guy that you can get him the ball in the block, and he's either going to, get a great shot for himself or a great shot for somebody else more often than not. The issue's been the stuff we just talked about, the defensive focus, the carrying out his responsibilities, the playing with a purpose in that regard, the blocking people out. He has a very unique ability to be an unbelievable rebounder without blocking anyone out sometimes. And
Which
that's a very unique skill,
yeah.
but it's also one that burns Purdue every now and then because,
yes, it does.
They have been really hurt by offensive rebounds the past 2 games. Nichols, it didn't matter because Nichols was never going to win that game anyway. And then Wisconsin, the thing about the Wisconsin game that maybe gets overlooked a little bit is so much of their first half scoring was on Purdue. If Purdue blocks out and Purdue doesn't turn over, Johnny Davis never gets going in the open floor. Perhaps Johnny Davis doesn't end up having the second half he had because he didn't build up that momentum in the first half. Purdue really did beat itself in the first half of that game. Now, Wisconsin beat Purdue in the second half, but Purdue beat Purdue in the first half. And I thought Purdue just did a good job. Now, again, apples to oranges comparing the opponents. I think that Purdue did a much better job not, shooting itself in the foot in this game.
Yeah, and that ends up spelling victory for Purdue and an important one to say the least with a win at Penn State against Micah Shrewsbury's team, who really I thought really did play well, and I think he's off to a very good start as the head coach there. It's funny, Johnny Davis, I was just thinking about that too. 26 points in his next game against Iowa. You run into guys that are playing hard and playing well, and Purdue may have had something to do with it. I agree with you by allowing those runouts and getting him some easy baskets early in that loss to Wisconsin on Monday night. All right, Tom, I want to come back to you now that you're back to join us. Obviously the news in the week in football is on that on Purdue's defensive coordinator. Of course, Brad Lambert moving on to Wake Forest. Maybe not a shocking move. He has his family's in Charlotte. That's North Carolina, relatively close to Winston-Salem. But it does present a void in that, and there may be more to come. And that's not surprising in today's 2021, 2022 football world, but still, it's hard to minimize the impact of Purdue's defense and the job that Brad Lambert did, at least in 1 year in West Lafayette.
Yeah, Brad did a good job. That entire staff really came together, I think, better than anybody could have imagined, fellas, right? I mean, Mark Hagan, Ron English, James Adams, Brad Lambert, so many unknowns coming into the year on that side of the ball. They injected a lot of portal personnel too. How was that going to blend? And I tell you what, from game 1 to game 13, I know that defense had a couple blips and a couple hiccups along the way, but for the most part, I think that defense was the real backbone of this 2021 team, and was the reason why they had this type of success. Now here we are, right, staring at some coaching changes. And while Brad Lambert was very good, I don't think they're overly worried about replacing him here. Jeff Brom has shown a willingness to hire guys he's never worked with. He's also hired guys he's worked with. So there's a wide open array of potential candidates to come in to join this staff. And they could have their next play caller on staff already, guys. It could be maybe someone like Ron English or Mark Hagan. So I do believe Purdue's going to take its time here and find the best possible candidate. And again, while Brad was very good, there's no sense of panic within that football office as far as his loss. And like you said, Alan, Wake Forest is familiar territory for Brad Lambert. His family still lives in Charlotte, and he also has, I know, some family concerns too that sort of helped draw him back to that part of the country. So you got to wish him the best, and he's walking into a nice situation. They're working for Dave Clawson in Winston-Salem for a program that got to the ACC championship game this last year.
Brian, Jeff Brom, one of the more important things he did last year, however it came to be, looked himself in the mirror, went out and found a defensive staff of guys that were not familiar to him or guys that he hadn't really worked with, I think almost exclusively. Maybe there is one exception in there. But again, that's an important thing for coaches to kind of know who they are and know what they're about. And as you look ahead, and we'll wait and find out what direction they go and how they piece this back together on the defensive staff. But I think, the fact that Jeff Brom knows what he wants out of his defense, and that's to play aggressively, and that's what Purdue did for the most part this year, or did almost exclusively. But how do you look at this as we've watched a lot of staffs and coaches come and go in today's world? They're going to do that even more often, maybe. But it still is it's always going to be a work in progress of trying to keep your staff together, one would think.
Yeah, you just preempted my take.
Sorry.
I think, I don't think anybody wanted to lose Brad Lambert. I think he did a great job. I think he was a good human being, a good fit on that staff from a chemistry perspective, from everything I understand, just an easy guy to get along with. But the silver lining, if there's a silver lining, is probably just what you said in terms of Brad Lambert probably in some small way illustrated to Jeff Brom what Jeff Brom wants in that role, what he wants systematically, what he wants from a personality perspective. We heard the word collaborative over and over again all year. And that was probably a subtweet of the guy who came before to a certain extent. But I think that Jeff Brom can just go out now. And whereas the last two hires, it's been almost kind of let's see what we got here and let's, kind of roll with it to I'm going to look for this kind of thing. Here, I want our defense to be aggressive. I want this, and this from a systematic perspective. But also, I want somebody who's easy to get along with, who doesn't have a huge ego, who doesn't have, perhaps that big personality, somebody who's going to work well with the guys coming back to the defensive staff, who's going to work well with him as a head coach. I think he seemed far more engaged from a defensive perspective this year, too, than he did the first few years. You could just tell when he was talking about defense in his press conferences that he was more in tune with what was going on. And I think Brom has taken a step here in the last year as a program manager, too. And I think that he's way better equipped now to go out and make this hire and for that hire to work and be seamless than he was maybe a couple of years ago.
Tom, man, as we start to wind this podcast and simulcast down, I did want to ask you about, we obviously, there's so much discussion about Purdue's two All-Americans and the great play of David Bell and George Karlaftis, but I'm interested in your take, and you've written about Purdue's MVPs and kind of breaking down what you saw from this past year. But who are some of the couple of guys that may have surprised you that the most in 2021? And ended up and I won't let you say Aiden O'Connell either. So there you go. What were guys that you even, or maybe better worded, Tom? Who are guys that you're really looking forward to see play next year, based on the little bit that we may have got to see from those guys in 2021?
Yeah, offensively, I think we're all kind of eager to see if Brock Thompson can continue where he left off in Nashville. We all know he has the surgeries coming up one knee at a time. Probably not going to be in spring football, obviously, but he's a guy that has a chance to be a bellwether here of that receiving core moving forward. And it's a receiving core that we know David Bell's gone, and in the future of Milton Wright's a little murky right now as well. So he could end up having to play a very big role here moving forward. I think we're all eager to see Samson James, who practiced with the team all year, got to campus in August after he transferred from Indiana. That's a running back room that needs a little bit of a talent injection, if you will. And I'm sure Samson's going to get a chance to maybe play a key role there. So those are two guys on that side of the ball. And, defensively, fellas, it's going to be interesting up front, I guess. To see who brings the heat off the edge, if you will. We saw Kydron Jenkins sort of take a step in that direction last year. He kind of got thrust in a bigger role when DeMarcus Mitchell had some injury issues, and Kydron Jenkins ended up sharing the team lead in sacks with George Karlaftis, if you can believe it. I think that linebacking core too. Jalen Graham is a future pro. We all know that. He looks like he's poised for a big senior year. The other two spots, Samisi Fakasheki will be back. Kieran Douglas will be back. And they both play the Mike spot as their positions of origin. But I think there's a chance you can see both those guys on the field together, with maybe Kieran Douglas playing the will and Samisi staying in the middle. That could be a kind of a strong linebacking core this year. It's going to be interesting to see how that comes together. And then in the wild card on defense, I think are the transfer of these three cornerbacks. T. Denson from Kansas State, Bryce Hampton from Adams State are going to be guys to watch. Of course, Reese Taylor from Indiana. T. Denson and Reese Taylor are starting caliber. I think we all know that a healthy Corey Trice is going to start. Jamari Brown's back as well. But I think one of those two transfers, Denson or Taylor, has a chance maybe to start. Long story short is they have much better depth in the back end now at cornerback, and it's going to help that secondary out quite a bit moving forward here, I think.
Yeah, good answer, Brian. Anybody else that you're looking at? I know your focus is on basketball these days, but just from a broad stroke view of that 2021 season, that roster, looking ahead, guys that may be surprising difference makers if they get that opportunity in 2022.
Well, if Purdue's going to keep playing man-to-man defense the way they did this year, they need those corners to deliver. A couple of years ago, we were sitting here talking about that very same point, that it looks like, hey, Purdue's got all this great depth at corner. And then DJ Johnson and Giovante Howard turned into pumpkins, and all of a sudden they had no depth at corner. I mean, that's been a position forever where Purdue's been struggling to develop good enough players to win at a Big Ten level, but also having more than one of them at a time. So it's those guys, the Bryce Hamptons, the T. Densons, the what's the other kid's name? I forgot.
Reese Taylor.
Reese Taylor. Thank you.
There you go.
I keep thinking of him as a quarterback because I covered him in high school.
Yeah.
It's at least two of those guys have to be, contributors next season for Purdue. If not, outright good players right away. But outside of that, it's you just got a lot of holes to fill. You got to be able to rush the passer next year one way or another. It'll be interesting to see, what Branson Dean and Jalen Graham are able to do as your next presumed standouts on defense when they don't have Karlaftis out there, and the gravity he always carried. But the wide receiver position, went from on paper as deep as it got anywhere, and then Mershawn Rice gets hurt, and then you lose Milton Wright for the bowl game. You don't have David Bell. You had injuries there all season long. Tyrone Tracy and
Elijah Canyon.
I keep wanting to call him Mannion for some reason. I don't know why I always do Mannion.
Ace Mannion. No, I don't want to mess you up. Go ahead.
Obviously, those transfer wide receivers have to step in right away.
Yeah.
I think you have a little bit of a known commodity in Brock Thompson. You have, hopefully for Purdue's sake, Milton Wright back. Hopefully for Mershawn Rice's sake.
Yeah.
That poor kid. Hopefully he gets to come back. TJ Sheffield, we don't really know what his status is after that seemingly ugly injury, but he'll presumably be back next season. This is going to be a story every year. Is those transfers have to step in and fill holes right away. So all the transfers would be my answer.
Again, speaking of the pass rush real quick, Scotty Humpich, the kid from Murray State, the Leo, they're bringing that kid in to rush the passer, 6'4", about 250. And he's another one. Brian's right. These transfers, they're brought in for a reason, right? I think Tyrone Tracy's going to start. They're not totally sure what Canyon's going to bring. I know he's a big target, but I know they want to see a little bit more of him in spring drills to get a real gauge on how good he is. But again, Tyrone Tracy, I'll be surprised if he's not starting. And again, I talked about Humpich as well. So a lot of interesting moving parts, guys. They're not done in the portal.
No.
They're still trying to get some running back. So, and they like to get an offensive lineman too. And classes start Monday. So if you're not enrolled by Monday, you can't take part in spring practice. Not ideal. Doesn't mean they're not going to still add people during the course of the spring and maybe even the summer.
Yeah.
Is anyone ever done in the portal?
Yeah. Never done in the portal.
No, they're not. And I and my feeble brain, I just can't even, I read what you write, both of you, and I can't even devote this stuff to memory. Just I know the Reese Taylors are going to be players, and I'm hearing you, boy. It's going to you can't tell the players without a digital program anymore. That's for darn sure.
Hey, real quick, let me talk a little bit about the DC job, and I'll hit this real quick. But again, the staff changes may go beyond the defensive coordinator. We've seen the rumblings about James Adams maybe leaving to Wake Forest. And of course, there's talk about maybe Jamarcus Shepard going elsewhere too. So long story short, the staff could undergo more changes beyond just having a new, or I should say just a replacement for Brad Lambert.
Yeah, change is the new constant, and that is the way of the world anymore in college football. All right, guys, good show tonight. Thank you. And Brian, safe travels back to West Lafayette, and let's hope you get a chance to go up to Ann Arbor and not have a game canceled. That would be good too. When Purdue
my wife needs her Zingerman's order, so
I know that's one of your favorite places, so you got to get up there. But
fingers crossed.
Purdue, Michigan next Tuesday. Purdue, Nebraska. Yeah, Purdue, Michigan Tuesday, Purdue, Nebraska Friday, and then it's Purdue, Illinois the following Monday. You got a lot going on in the world of basketball. So, all right, I want to thank our sponsor, the Union Club Hotel, also the 811 Restaurant. Even Drew Brees' new enterprise in restaurant is going to open up next week, right? Walk-ons in the Union as well. So a lot going on there, and we appreciate all their business as well. So have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks for watching and or listening. Stay safe and well, and we'll look forward to our next Saturday simulcast. And that will be next week, heading after the Purdue-Nebraska game. That is presuming that all these games get played. So that's the world we're living in these days. But we'll look forward to that. Keep your fingers crossed. All right, have a great rest of the weekend. Thanks all.
Bye, guys.